Anyone, what are some stories you have wanted to tell people but haven't had the right Ask Reddit question to answer?
Years ago my family had 2 cats. Susie would terrorize Guy, all day, every day. She'd stalk and attack him, and his whole life ended up consisting of hiding. We almost never saw him. So the vet put Susie on Prozac. Though it didn't seem to affect her, it came in handy when I ran out of Prozac one month and borrowed some of hers. A few months later, the vet put Guy on some sort of stimulant in hopes that it would prompt him to stand up for himself. Again, no noticeable effects. About a year later an envelope arrived in our mailbox addressed to Guy in our last name. Clearly assuming that Guy was a human, the letter, which was sent by a large legal firm, explained that the manufacturer of the medication Guy had been prescribed was the subject of a class action lawsuit due to price manipulation, and asked if Guy would like to join the suit. We replied in the affirmative, then forgot all about it. About another year later Guy received a check for around $150 for his legal victory. Mom used the money to buy him toys and treats. TLDR, my cat won a class action suit against a pharma company. P.S. I just spoke to Mom. She reminded me that, shortly before Guy got involved in the legal system, he received a federal tax refund. It wasn't for much, we think it was 75 cents, but that cat knew how to generate revenue.
My science teacher in 8th grade was talking to us about evolution in bedbugs, and how bedbugs evolved to become resistant to bug spray and whatnot. Then he whips a petri dish from behind his back with live-ass bedbugs in it, and proceeds to tell us we cannot under any circumstances tell the principal about this, because he'd get fired. Next thing you know, he sneezes really hard and drops the fucking petri dish. The bed bugs go everywhere, sliding across the floor. Then after we'd all finished screaming and freaking out, that little fucker proceeds to tell us that they're not bed bugs. They're sunflower seeds.
I created a scene at a Target Starbucks. It was February 15th, which meant all the Valentine's Day candy was on sale. So obviously, my friend and I decided to go to Target and get some, which was not that far from our school, as soon as classes were over. The both of us were in our school's robotics team and had just spent the last 5.5 weeks staying after school till about 6:30, school ended at 1:45, to work on that season's robot. This was going to be another one of those days, so we decided to also stop at Starbucks to grab coffees. My friend ordered first, and I, right after. While my friend was waiting for his drink, the lone barista was making it, so I was also waiting for him to take my order. As I was waiting, a group of middle-aged Indian aunties got in line behind me. They started conversing between themselves in Hindi, which I understand mostly perfectly. I wasn't paying too close attention, until I heard one of them say my last name, which was written on the back of the hoodie I was wearing. They caught my attention and I just kept listening. The barista eventually took my order and I joined my friend while I waited for my drink to be made. That's when I heard the things that really made my blood boil. The women were making comments about me and my friend. They were saying things like, "Oh, that must be her boyfriend, oh, he's quite ugly, look at her, walking around shamelessly like that." They just kept going and going. However, the thing that made me snap were the comments on my hair. "Oh, her hair is so frizzy and ugly. I already hate my hair, so much. I know it's frizzy and I absolutely hate when people mention it. I'm very aware about how frizzy it is. Don't say anything. I'm trying to find a product that works, okay?" I usually wouldn't say anything to people like this because I hate confrontation, but I was already having a terrible day, so. Oh boy. I turned around and asked the women, in Hindi, "Are you done? Are you done talking about us?" The woman in the middle, who I made direct eye contact with, went pale. She stuttered, "Sorry, but I was not done." I asked her, "Who do you think you are to talk about us like that? You're not my mom, so why do you care if my hair is ugly?" At this point, my friend had my drink in his hands and just came behind and started to nudge me, to tell me to not make a scene and to just leave. The barista was watching, a few people who were leaving were also watching. As we left, I literally yelled, "Mind your own business. Never again." Every time I think about this, I'm embarrassed. I hate doing shit like this, but I don't know what overcame me and led me to act that way, but holy fuck.
Not necessarily a story that I wanted to tell, but more of, I was reminded of something today that I did many years ago. When I was in my second year of college, my dad was selling the house he and I lived in because he was getting remarried. My dad's wife had a friend whose husband was an electrician, and had to do some work to fix some minor code violations for sale of the house. This was the first time I met this guy, but never had met his wife. He had keys to the house and wasn't expecting me, so he was kind of surprised when I came home. He was with a woman who was helping him. I didn't think anything of it. Couple of days later in that break, my dad's wife and I were talking, and she asked what I thought of this guy. I said he seemed to do a good job, but I thought his wife was pretty fun. I said I also thought his wife was named something else, and when I said that, my dad's wife's face went pale. Apparently his helper was a woman he was caught having an affair with years before, and claimed he broke it off. I inadvertently revealed this, and blew his cover. His wife left him, and it was this whole big thing. Strangely, I was blamed by my dad's wife and this guy's daughter for ruining a whole family. The electrician's wife in the situation ended up falling off the wagon, and eventually dying of cirrhosis. Their daughter was fucked up, and into weird shit, and dropped out of high school 2 years later to move in with a 40-year-old at 17. All because I came home a day early for winter break in 2003.
I was once forced to wear a wig in my ID photo for a secure access card. It was my first year of grad school, and the lab I was rotating in was located in a building owned not by my university, but by a large company that I don't work for. To get to the lab, I needed a company access card for the elevator, which meant I had to have an ID photo taken. So I jumped through all the hoops to get approved for the card and trekked down to the basement they're taking photos in, where I'm informed that they can't take my photo because I'm not in company employee dress code. Their employee's hair is required to be a natural color, and mine is blue. I explain that I'm not a company employee and that my university doesn't require grad students to adhere to a dress code. The company photographer explains that their policy says they can't take a photo for a company ID card unless I'm in company employee dress code, and it has no exceptions for the extremely common scenario of grad students needing access to this particular building. I'm obviously not going to dye my hair for one photo, so I have to find another solution. I go to my department head and ask him if he can intercede on my behalf. He is not sympathetic. He is not a fan of the hair. I ask company if I can use an old photo from before I dyed my hair. They say yes, but it can't be more than 3 years old and it has to be on a white or gray background. I own exactly one photo fitting that description. They reject it because the resolution is too low. So I ask them if I can just wear a wig. To my disbelief, they say yes. They have no compunctions about me wearing a disguise in a photo whose sole purpose is to identify me, as long as the wig is a natural color. I return to the photo basement in a shiny waist-length brunette costume wig. They take the photo without hesitation, it looks nothing like me, and print it on the ID card, which I've kept ever since because I don't think anyone would believe me otherwise.
When I was in high school, I threw a party, and a friend drunkenly put a hole in the wall right by the entrance. My parents would be back in a little over 24 hours. The day following the party, I went to Home Depot and explained to the guy working there my situation, to which he basically told me, "Yeah, dude, you don't have enough time to fix a hole in the wall." After getting all the supplies, I figured I was good to go out with some friends for a while, come home and quickly fix the wall. I come home from being out around 10 p.m., giving me about 12 hours before my parents would come home. I fill up the hole with the mesh and sheetrock. Now it's all filled up and smooth, still wet and obviously a different color than the wall itself. I remembered that my mom painted the wall herself a few years back, and there are still paint containers left over in the basement. After grabbing a container that matched the color of the wall, I got ready to cover the spot. The second I painted onto the wall, I immediately noticed the paint color was too dark. It's the same color but a much darker shade, so my mom must have thought it was too dark and added white to lighten the color. So, I go back to the basement for white paint. I spend the next few hours trying to find the right shade that my mom used, so once painted, the wall would match in color with the surrounding walls. After an eternity, I finally get the right color. It's 3 to 4 a.m. at this point, and I paint the whole wall. Once I'm done, the wall looks great. You can't even tell there was ever a hole. My next obvious issue is the smell of paint. One step into the house, and my parents would immediately know something isn't right. It reeks of paint. That's when I remembered seeing a can of blue paint in the basement. I grab the blue paint and a poster board used from a school project, and make a sign saying "Welcome Home." I then hang the sign in the same room as the wet wall, on an opposite wall to draw attention there, and off the painted wall. I purposely leave the can of blue paint there on the floor with the lid off to help sell the reason for the strong smell of paint. Then I went to bed, exhausted and with only a few hours to spare. I woke up when they arrived to greet them, and to see if I was gonna get busted or not. My plan worked like a charm. I got away with it. They loved the welcome home sign. I know what you must be wondering, but what about the wet paint? There's no way it dried in time. You're right, it was 100% still wet when they arrived. I just prayed nobody would touch the wall. That's one of my stories I'm actually very proud of. That was over 10 years ago, and I'm still just as proud today of that accomplishment as I was back then. Edit. For those assuming my parents knew, but went along with it. There's a 0% chance of that. My parents were insanely strict, my dad especially. In fact, a few weeks before, I had already got in trouble for having people over, because the neighbors ended up calling my parents to complain about the noise.
The Vapo Rub story. So I had a fever and was sick, laying around waiting for it to stop or unalive me already. I was watching Homicide Hunter, and Kenda was describing how he used Vapo Rub to mask the smell of homicide victims at crime scenes. At this point I'm really not well, so I go to get cough syrup out of the medicine cabinet. That's when I see the blue jar of Vapo Rub. I absolutely lost it. I'm freaking out trying to figure out who put the dead people salve in my cabinet. Why is it here? Who put it there? Is this a threat? Am I going to be dealing with murder victims soon? My boyfriend gets home and I am crying. He's panicking, asking what's wrong. I start screaming that I don't want to be a homicide detective while pointing at an innocuous blue jar. We end up going to the ER and I had a fever of 104 degrees. Also, I was the one who bought the Vapo Rub.
One time I was at the store, buying party supplies for a Christmas Eve party. You can imagine the store was packed because it was Christmas time. I hate crowded stores. One thing I had to get for my mom was a pack of ginger ale cans. I went to the self-checkout, and the sticker for the pack of cans was on the top of the pack. I awkwardly rolled the pack over on the scanner to scan the barcode, and a single can fell out onto the floor of the store. As it hit the ground, a tiny hole busted open between the body of the can and the seam of the top of the can. A small pressurized stream of ginger ale was projecting out of the can as it began to roll away. Like a ginger ale sprinkler, it rolled down the alley of self-checkouts, misting all the Christmas Eve shoppers with ginger ale as the clerk had to chase it down the queue of people waiting to check out. It was quite embarrassing.
I am 28, totally blind, and this is a story of the most ironic thing that ever happened to me. So picture summer, 2013. I am on the last vacation I would take with my whole family before my parents separated, but that's another story. So we went to Washington, D.C. from Ontario, because at the time my sister knew a lot about American history and wanted to do that. So on the final day of our vacation I say, since we are going to visit the Library of Congress for a quick tour, we should try to figure out where the Braille and audiobooks are produced, because I know there's a printing house for the blind near here. We ask a librarian and after a few moments she has a description for us of where it is. So my dad and I set out. So it's raining pretty steadily, we go on a subway. For stops in the wrong direction. We have to travel 8 subway stops. We quickly run the 3 or so blocks and find the correct building. It is just about to close, but we ask if we can go in and take a picture, but they say, sorry, no, you can have a pamphlet though. Fine, I guess. I am a little disappointed, but I had gotten to read some Braille pamphlets from the Capitol building and the Mint, so I think that they will have one there. The pamphlet I received says, Accessible Reading for All, in print, with 0 Braille. We take a picture of me with the pamphlet under their sign outside in the rain. The most ironic thing that ever happened to me, and I could not stop laughing. It was my Facebook profile for a while.
When I was 12 or 13 years old, I was really into fishing. I mean to the point where I was reading In Fisherman magazine, begging to go to Bass Pro Shop, and would even wake up really early on Saturdays because they would sometimes be playing fishing infomercials at like 4 a.m. And of course, every weekend I would drag my parents out to the forest preserve so I could fish. They weren't into it themselves, but they encouraged it because it kept me out of trouble and they got to enjoy some relaxation time. The little lake I liked fishing at did not rent boats, but it did have a dock for people with boats to use. Because we didn't have one, I would just fish off the dock on one of those foldable cloth chairs. It was nice, but I was mostly always catching small fish and felt that the bigger ones were out there in the middle of the lake out of my reach. Then one day we're at Kmart, and we see this big inflatable raft on sale. I asked my dad if we could get it, so we could take it out on the lake, and to my surprise he said yes. So, we go out that weekend, and I'm super excited to finally get out on the lake. We inflate the raft, get our stuff in, followed by ourselves, and then pushed off from the dock. We row out to the middle of the lake and drop a little improvised anchor my dad came up with. He took a nap, and I fished for about an hour. Didn't even get a bite, which was disappointing. We go back to the shore, and I get back to fishing off of the dock while my dad starts grilling steak for some tacos. In order to dry the bottom, so it wouldn't get nasty when we packed it up, we turned the raft over and left it out to dry in the sun. About 15 minutes later, a park ranger rolls up on us as we are eating. He points to the raft and asks, "You guys aren't thinking of taking that out there, are you?" My dad and I give each other a wide-eyed look and then both give him a drawn-out, "No." The officer replies, "Well, that's good to hear, because I would have to write you a ticket for that. It's dangerous to have inflatables in that water because it could easily get punctured. Why don't you pack that up, and I can be on my way?" So he stayed there and made sure we put it away and then left. We honestly had not even thought about how dangerous it could have been for us, especially with me fishing with sharp hooks. That ranger totally knew that we were out there. He just wanted to be nice and not write us a ticket, and instead inform us about the dangers, which I thought was pretty cool of him.